What's going on, everybody? You're listening to another episode of the Phillies Nation podcast. I'm your host, Jonny Heller. It's a special episode this week, one we did last offseason and one we're excited to do this offseason, which is our ideal offseason. So both me and my co-host Ty will give, what we think would be the best case scenario for the Phillies this offseason, or maybe just, our creative spin on a good offseason for the Phillies. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Ty Daubert. Ty, how you doing?
I'm good. Excited to get into some off-season talk. I feel like this is kind of where we thrive. It's where we started off last year, and we had a good time with it, of course. So I'm excited to get into some of our trades and signings that we would make if we were running the Phillies. We obviously aren't doing that. I'm not really sure who exactly is running the Phillies. Ned Rice is the interim GM at this time, but it doesn't seem like they're going to hire anyone above him at this point. We're going to see how that plays out, but no matter who's in charge, it's a big offseason coming up for the Phillies, and I guess we'll get into how we would handle it if we were the ones running the team.
Yeah, it's definitely a good point. Like, they fired Clentak, but is there really a point to that? There's not really any change up there happening. It'll be interesting to see how they handle this offseason, especially if they don't decide to hire anyone in particular. But I think the first thing we should talk about before we go into our ideal off seasons, John Morosi of MLB.com, MLB Network, recently tweeted out, I think we're recording this on Wednesday. I think he recorded this about he tweeted this about 15 minutes ago that Francisco Lindor is going to be traded this offseason and that the Phillies are a potential suitor. So, Ty, do you think there's any scenario in which the Phillies trade for Francisco Lindor this offseason?
I doubt that it happens. I don't think it's extremely likely, but I think it's more possible than some Phillies fans think. I don't think that Lindor is he's really going to take as much in a trade as people might think. You just think back to what Cleveland got for Clevenger, even back at the trade deadline. You think about what any huge name goes in, how they go in a trade with 1 year remaining like that when they're getting ready for free agency. You think back to Mookie Betts last year. There's a bunch of other examples where you think they're really going to take a ton, but in reality, it just seems like the teams that hold these superstar players are just trying to really get something back without much leverage, because they know that the other teams know that they don't want to pay these players in free agency, and that seems like it's kind of the same situation in Cleveland with them trying to trade him.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And it's also, I think it's heightened too, the Betts trade happened before any of COVID-19 and any of the ramifications from COVID-19 happened. So I think, maybe there were teams other than the Dodgers willing to trade for Betts last offseason. You don't really know how many teams. I know Lindor's going to get north of $20 million in arbitration. You don't know how many teams are going to be willing to give assets to take that on. Obviously, Lindor's a great player, but you're trading for 1 year of him, and some players might not know. I don't know if I can even try to re-sign him long term or try to give him an extension before he hits free agency, or anything like that. So I think the Indians have even, like you said, they don't really have any leverage, no matter what. But I think that even is especially true now. You're not going to see many teams that are willing to give up a lot to take on, an additional $20+ million. As for the Phillies themselves, so my thing with that is, if I don't see them trading for Lindor and re-signing JT Realmuto, just given the way they've talked about their financial situation, the way owner John Middleton has talked about his financial situation. I think that would be smart. Those would both be smart moves, but I don't see them doing it. Especially if Realmuto walks, are they really going to give up assets for a guy who's going to be a free agent in a year after what happened with Realmuto? I just don't really see it happening.
Yeah, I think that's the part that makes it unlikely. The fact that they would have to pay Lindor what he's going to get in arbitration. I don't see how you could let one $20+ million player walk in free agency and then go out and trade for another one if the big thing is you're unsure about your financial situation. Apparently, if the Middleton has talked about he doesn't know if fans are going to be in the stands next year, and he's not the governor or whoever, so that's a reason that they're unsure about the financial situation, or so they claim. So I don't, if they're not willing to pay Real Muto, I don't see them being willing to pay Lindor this season, especially when they could get him for just money next off season. So I think that's what makes it a little more unlikely. But I think they could put together the players that it would take to trade for Lindor.
What do you think that package would look like?
From a Phillies perspective, I think something like Stott and Kingery is a good starter, and then you throw in some other prospects, maybe some pitching prospects that are closer to major league ready. Someone like a Medina, somebody like that. I think is a competitive offer. Just because, like we said, I don't think that teams will be giving up as much as some people might think.
Yeah, I think something around that's pretty reasonable. Yeah, so on that note, really, I think before we give our ideal off seasons, we should discuss like the ideal off season for the Phillies. Is to spend money. That is the biggest market inefficiency right now. Is teams are not willing to spend money on good players. And like if the Phillies were just willing to spend money on good players, they could come out of this offseason looking really good. Like for example, if they let's say they just wanted to stay under the luxury tax, so that's at $210 million based on the MLB trade rumors, like salary projections, free agency projections. The Phillies could sign JT Realmuto, Didi Gregorius, so keep those two, and then sign Brad Hand, Mark Melancon, and Kirby Yates for the bullpen. Add Charlie Morton to the rotation, and bring back Brad Miller for the bench or DH. So that's like pretty much like last year's roster. With you're adding Morton, who's an upgrade over Arrieta, and you're adding really good bullpen pieces, and that's just spending the same amount of money they spent last year. That's not like going over the luxury tax. That's not doing anything like like the Yankees have done. Whatever, like that is just the baseline, staying right under the luxury tax. They could do that, and it doesn't look like they're willing to spend all that money. But that's like that team is good, and they
I think that's the division favorite. I think.
Maybe the Braves are still obviously really good. The division also is competitive, and it would depend on what everyone else does. But it's definitely like, what are the Phillies last year if the bullpen's good? Like they're a playoff team. They're probably a playoff team in like a normal year. In a 162 game season, 5 teams make the playoffs. If last year's Phillies had a good bullpen, they're a playoff team. And that's what this potential offseason would give them. So yeah, I mean, Ty, what do you?
And Charlie Morton. Not only would it give them a good bullpen, it would give them Charlie Morton over Jake Arrieta. Yeah, I think that not just this year when teams are really unwilling to spend. Teams are generally unwilling to spend almost every year. We've seen it for the last couple of years where, Bryce Harper and Manny Machado 2 years ago, they got their money, but good players were out there until the summer, until the middle of the season. You look at Craig Kimbrell and Dallas Keuchel, good players, proven players. Of course, there's critiques on those players, but teams were much more willing to take bets on unproven players that made less money than they were to just get the players that they know were pretty good and to pay them. We see it all the time. And if a team would just be willing to go out there and give players what they're worth on what they should be worth on the market, that it improves your team by so much. It seems like such a novel concept, actually going out and paying money for the best players or for good players, but it's really so simple, and all it would take is one team to just go out and do it. And maybe some other teams would do it. Probably not. Probably not, but that's even better if you're that one team who decides to go out and do it. The Phillies 2 years ago, they made it seem like, everyone knows about the stupid money comments and all, but they didn't spend stupid money. They spent pretty reasonable money on Bryce Harper. If anything, they stretched it out too long so that they're going to end up paying him longer than is probably ideal because they only wanted to pay him $25 million a year. But in the year where they were spending quote unquote stupid money, they didn't even go over the luxury tax. There has been more work to be done and more players they could have added to the team for the last 2 years. And it seems like it's going to be the same thing again this year, especially in a year where other teams are not going to be spending the money.
Right, and even on the basis of like, let's say they didn't sign like Springer or go out, get the big names. Like there are even more guys this year who, their player option wasn't picked up, or they were, or are going to be non-tendered and not like go into arbitration because teams are especially cheap. And like people talk so much about how the Phillies, just aren't there, and like they're not going to contend because they did the whole rebuild and it didn't work. Well, guess what? Like they have a solid core. They have Rhys Hoskins, they have Aaron Nola, they have Bryce Harper, they have they could literally just go out re-sign JT Realmuto, who is a part of that core. You have Zach Wheeler, you have Zach Eflin. Like that core itself is enough that you could just spend money and add to it, and maybe it's perceived as like band-aids. It doesn't matter. Like if you go out and just spend money and get good players, like you're gonna win. Doesn't matter if they're homegrown players. Doesn't matter if your farm system's good or if it's not. Like the jury isn't out on, or sorry, the your team isn't like done for if their farm system is bad. Just spend money. It's very easy to spend money.
Yeah, we have owners talk all the time about how the right way to build a team is not through free agency, but through building the farm system. And maybe that's a little bit more sustainable over the long term. But they're only telling you that because they don't want to sign free agents. They would rather pay the cheaper players. It's so obvious. And, the Phillies have not put together a good enough farm system to build a team that way. And if they're not going to go out and pay the free agents that are out there that they obviously need to make their team good enough, they're not doing 100% of what's possible to make the team as best as they can. No matter how they try to spin it, it's just not what they're doing. And when your owner goes out and he goes on sports radio and says he's going to get his trophy back or die trying, but then in one of the most important off seasons, he's not going to go sign the best players. He's not even going to put together a front office to even go out and try to sign the best players possible and put together a winning team. I don't know how you could see that as dying trying. It's barely trying at all.
And let's not forget, like Rhys Hoskins, Bryce Harper, Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler. Well, Zach Wheeler's a little bit older, but like Hoskins, Nola, and Harper are all like 27, 28. Like they're not going to be this good forever. They have like 2 or 3 years of their peak, and then who knows beyond that. So like I agree with you, Ty. Like you can't just not even hire someone. Like you're wasting the prime of the players, like your best players. Like what are you doing if you have a good core and you're not even trying to put a good team around them? I just don't get it.
Yeah, it just seems pretty directionless at this point. Now, of course, there's a whole off season to change our minds. It is November 11th right now. There's a whole off season ahead of us. They could change our minds. They could go out and actually get the best players out there. But at this point, it just doesn't feel like that's what they're going to do. And unless they do that, I don't think fans should be happy with what the team's doing.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. With that, let's dive in. So Ty, I'll let you lead us off. Ty, what is your ideal offseason for the Phillies?
All right, so ideally, of course, is just what we talked about, but with these off seasons that we put together, we put some caveats in front of it. We are going to assume that the payroll will be about $10 million less than what it was last season. So that gives the Phillies, based on what they are projected for next year already, it gives them about 55 million to work with, something in that range. It isn't an exact science with these projections, but it's pretty close. So here is what I have put together if I was running the Phillies and if I was given that much to work with. The first thing I'm going to do is in arbitration, I'm going to keep Hector Neris. We assume he gets about $5 million, something in that range, because they did decline his option. So he's staying in arbitration. I have everyone else that they haven't already declined or released in arbitration. They're staying on what they're projected for, other than Vince Velasquez, who is going to get non-tendered, and I'm re-signing him for $2.5 million. So that saves about $1.8 million. People will, compared to what he was projected for, people are going to argue with me about that one, but the Phillies will need somebody in that swingman role to eat up some innings in either the bullpen or as a starter. So that's what I'm doing with all the arbitration players, other than the ones I've already gotten rid of, like Hembry and Morgan. Everyone else is staying on what they are projected for. First free agent signing, I'm going out and I am bringing back Drew Smiley for $6 million. Smiley really put it together in San Francisco this season. If the Phillies have him, that improves their team by a lot this year. In 2020, if they had Drew Smiley, not that their starting rotation was bad whatsoever, but they could have used him. Next thing I'm doing, he's a guy that I have talked about on this podcast before, Jock Peterson, coming to the Phillies on what MLB Trade Rumors projected him. 2 years, $18 million, so that adds $9 million to the payroll for next year. Peterson can, if there is a DH, maybe take on a little bit of a wider Jay Bruce type of role. He can split some time in center field, left field, first base, right field if there's a rare occasion that Harper isn't playing. But he's a legit power bat against right-handed pitching. Left-handers, different story, but he's going to help the team. Next person I'm signing for what he was projected on MLB Trade Rumors. He was projected to the Phillies, I believe, if I remember correctly. Liam Hendricks, coming for 3 years, $30 million, add $10 million. He's going to be a legitimate back of the bullpen kind of pitcher. Then I'm signing Marcus Semien for 1 year, $14 million. The same thing that Didi Gregorius got. He'll come in, be your shortstop. You can reevaluate after that. You can see what you have in Bryson Stott for 2022. Maybe he even comes up at some point this season. I think that's probably likely. So you're signing Semien, bringing him in on the Gregorius deal, and then you can see what Stott is, or you can go after somebody like Lindor or one of the other shortstops next free agent market. Another former Philly coming back in, $1.5 million for a year. We got Aaron Loop, World Series hero, other than that one game, I guess, but he was pretty good throughout the playoffs. Aaron Loop, a Phillies and
World
Rays
Series
legend.
hero, except for the fact that they lost the World Series.
Listen, man, it doesn't matter. Then we're bringing back for 3 years, $6 million. Jose Alvarez, he'll be making $2 million next season. Maybe he signs for something like $3 million, but I think 3.6 is pretty reasonable. Gets a little more length out of that. And he was one of the most important bullpen pitchers on the Phillies the last couple of years. Probably Matt Klentak's best move, other than probably signing Harper. But Alvarez is legitimately good. Him going down this season after getting hit by that line drive maybe is the reason they missed the playoffs. of a million reasons, but that is one of them. Then for $1.5 million, we're bringing in reliever Carl Edwards Jr. He had an injury this year, but if he can pitch like he did with the Cubs, like that's a pretty reliable right-handed reliever. I think that could be a good addition coming off injury. The last free agent signing, I said it last year, I'm saying it again. For $750,000, Phillies are bringing back Tommy Hunter. I think in a little bit less of a role. He was all right for most of this year in a less vital role. I think that's a pretty good bargain. I know people are ready to move on from him, but hey, if you're capping yourself at $10 million under what you were at last year, give or take, you're going to have to sign some cheap vets. It's just what you're going to have to do. And then the last one, the big one, the staple of my offseason, JT Realmuto will not be returning because of the financial limitations that I have. I could not add all these players and his projected contract. So we are trading Mauricio Llovera and Kyle Doey. Maybe it would take a little bit more for this. That's fine. We'll throw some more prospects in to this trade. I wrote about him. We're trading for Gary Sanchez, who's projected to make $5.75 million. Power hitting catcher, kind of underrated on defense. Not that he's a great defender by any metric, but passable on defense. Was pretty bad this year. Seems like the Yankees are done with him, so it doesn't seem like it would take that much. But that is my offseason. We're trading for Gary Sanchez if I am the GM of the Phillies.
All right, I'm going to counter you on some of your moves just for, the sake of argument. So Drew Smiley for $6 million. Would you rather have Drew Smiley or Adam Wainwright 1 year, $6 million?
Drew Smiley.
I think I'd take Wainwright. Would you rather? I don't know. Would you? There was one more in there. See, the thing about Peterson and excuse me, I'll get into this in my offseason. He can't hit lefties. $9 million feels like a lot for a platoon bat when you're kind of in general the team is cheaping out.
I think there's obviously more righties than lefties. So if it's somebody that can only hit against lefties, I think I agree with you. But a majority of the time, he's going to be able to play. And if he's played center field in the past. He's probably not great at it. But if he can split time in center field with Kingery, and Kingery faces lefties most of the time, I think that's a win.
All right. Interesting. Yeah, I do think the Sanchez trade would probably take a little bit more, but
I don't know. The Yankees did not start him in the playoffs. They feel like they're pretty much done with Gary Sanchez at this point, whether that's for better or worse.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued in the Gary Sanchez trade. I think that makes sense for both teams, especially if the price is relatively cheap. Do you have what your starting lineup and rotation, everything would look like?
I didn't write that down, but my rotation, it would just be basically the rotation for most of last year: Nola, Wheeler, Eflin, Howard, and we add in Drew Smiley. If I am running this team, that's what's going on. Drew Smiley, and then Velasquez is kind of the swing man, the backup starter there. And yeah, just basically replacing Arrieta with Smiley. And like I said, it would mostly be the same lineup as last year. Insert Gary Sanchez for Realmuto. It'll be Segura at second base, Simeon at shortstop, and then Bohm at third, and then kind of mix and match with Kingery in center, Peterson in center. If there's a DH, then Peterson and McCutchen will both get some time at DH. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't have the full rundown of the bullpen because I'm not exactly sure which of the guys from this year are going to be in AAA and which will be in the majors.
Sounds good. All right, I'm going to dive into mine. So all right, I'm just gonna dive in. So the first thing I'm doing, I'm not signing JT Realmuto just because of the financial limitations and the fact that the Phillies have a lot of holes to fill. I don't think, pretty much half of their available salary to one player would make sense in this scenario. So I'm signing James McCann to a 2-year, $20 million contract. I'm hoping that the offense that he's shown the past 2 seasons is for real, and that he's pretty solid defensively. His framing hasn't been great, and the Phillies are pretty notorious for being able to help catchers learn how to frame. So I'm kind of investing in that. And then I'm going to bolster the bench a lot. I'm going to sign Shin-Soo Choo for a 1-year, $2.5 million contract. I'm not sure how much Choo could play the field, if at all. Maybe if you need it in a pinch, but I kind of see him as kind of platooning with McCutchen. Not necessarily all the time, but he profiles really similarly to McCutchen in that, he was better a few years ago, but he still has an OBP of like 370, 380. He's going to have an OPS over 800 for you probably. He'll hit some home runs. I think he is the perfect bat to have to complement McCutchen if you want to give McCutchen days off. And then I'm signing Howie Kendrick, 1 year, $2 million, just a bench guy. I think he's, he was the World Series hero just 2 years ago. He wasn't great last season, but, he could play a little bit at a few infield positions, primarily first base, but, he could fill in for you and former Philly, so got to bring him back. And then I'm bringing back another former Philly, Brad Miller, 1 year, $1.5 million. He can play a little infield, a little outfield. He could hit. We know. No batting gloves. We're a big fan.
He's the king of multi-homer games.
That is true. He will never stop hitting multiple home runs in a game. All right, and then moving on to the bullpen, I'm signing Mark Melancon to a 1-year, $4 million deal. Melancon, not as, well beyond his peak, but he's still a solid veteran reliever. 1 year, $4 million. Again, this is all MLB trade rumors projections. The bench guys weren't featured on that because it was the top 50, so I kind of guessed there. But Melancon, 1 year, $4 million. And then I am signing Jose Alvarez. I went 1 year, $3 million. I like Ty's idea of 3 years, $6 million. Get that annual salary down a little bit, but I'm good with really either, even if it's 1 year deal. I'm signing Kirby Yates to a 1 year, $5 million deal. He was hurt last year and wasn't good when he was healthy. I think he only pitched a handful of times, but why not have the 2 best splitters in the game on the same team? I didn't talk about arbitration. I'm pretty much doing the same thing as Ty, except I'm not re-signing Velasquez. He's gone, not tendering him. And I'm hoping to bring Neris back somewhere around $5 million.
If you want to go all in on the splitter bullpen, where is Blake Parker?
That's a good question. Maybe we bring him back on a veteran on like a minimum, or.
But I can replace him in the Tommy Hunter spot if that needs to be.
Yeah. And then my last bullpen move to really bolster the back end, I'm signing Brad Hand, 2 years, $14 million. So yeah, I think that those are all like pretty affordable moves that the Phillies could make in this scenario. And then I'm signing Charlie Morton, 1 year, $8 million. He's replacing Jake Arrieta, so that's a step up, right, from Arrieta. All right, and then the last thing I'm doing after all those signings is I'm making a little bit of a splash on the trade market. Obviously, right now I don't really have a shortstop, so I am calling up the Rays, and I'm trading Adam Hazley, Adonis Medina, and Scott Kingery for Willie Adames and Kevin Kiermaier. So maybe the Phillies need to throw in a little bit more here. I'm hoping to avoid trading Bryson Stott in this deal. Maybe like someone like Rafael Marchand, sweeten it up. I don't know exactly, but it might seem a little light for the Rays, but they're giving me Kiermaier, who's owed $11 million, or he's owed $13 million, but it's 11 against the tax. And I think that the Rays, we've seen time and time again, they will a lot of times do whatever they can to get rid of salary, and they have three of their top four prospects are shortstops, including Wander Franco, who's the top prospect in baseball and is MLB ready. So he's Adames is kind of expendable for them. So that's why I'm trying to make this deal. And yeah, so my with all these deals in mind, my lineup, I have McCann catching, I have Rhys Hoskins at first, Gene Segura at second base, Willie Adames at shortstop, Alec Boehm at third, and then in the outfield I have Kevin Kiermaier in center field, Bryce Harper in left field, Andrew McCutcheon Bryce Harper in right field, Andrew McCutcheon in left field. I have Brad Miller DHing, and then my bench I have Andrew Knapp, Shin-Soo Choo, Howie Kendrick, Roman Quinn. And then eventually I do think Bryson Stott might be up. I'll talk a little bit about that later. In my rotation, Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler, Charlie Morton, Zach Eflin, Spencer Howard. That's an upgrade from last season. Maybe the lineup in general is a little bit worse than last year, but that rotation is an upgrade. The bullpen, I have Brad Hand, Mark Melanson, Jose Alvarez, Kirby Yates, Hector Neris, Connor Brogdon, Jojo Romero, and then Ramon Rosso is my swing man. I think he can handle a spot start if he needs to. Otherwise, maybe he cleans up in blowouts or whatever out of the bullpen. To touch on the trade a little bit more for Adames.
Yeah, I have questions about the trade.
Yes.
I have some questions.
Go ahead.
I get the salary relief aspect. I get that the Rays will tend to get rid of players for salary relief, but I do not see them trading two starters from their World Series team for basically two borderline bench / platoon players at this point. I don't see it happening.
Yeah, you might be right. It might be late. That maybe Stott does have to go in the deal. I think I would if you're telling me I have to take out Kingery and put Stott in there. I would probably still do it. I was just obviously you want to get the best deal, but I still that is a good point. If I'm able to trade with keeping Stott, my long-term plan is you're gonna after next year you're gonna move Alec Boehm to DH and you're gonna be able to play maybe Segura at third and then move Adames or Stott to second base. But if you have to move Stott, you keep Kingery. Maybe Kingery plays third or second. Longer term, I think you're right. It might be a little late on the return. Maybe do you think like a guy like Francisco Morales sweetens it to a point?
That feels like too much.
Okay, so that's the thing is finding the right spot. I just like the idea of that trade because I think it's like Adames is someone who people aren't really talking about as a trade option for anyone or as someone the Rays will trade, but I think he's going to get traded, and I think Kiermaier is going to get traded too. So it's just a matter of if the Phillies can meet whatever price that is.
Yeah. I'd be open to trading for either of those players. Kiermaier, he hit some big homers in the postseason. That's not really his brand of baseball. He's one of the better defensive players in the game. But playoffs, he was hitting big home runs. It just really isn't what he's typically like, though.
Yeah, and something interesting about Adames is his home road splits are like ridiculously skewed. Like he has never been able to hit at home and has always been really good at the road. And some people think that's because of the drop. They think that the lighting there is like really wacky. It's affected players there before. So maybe he is even better when he goes to somewhere where he's just hitting outside all the time, like Citizens Bank Park. So I'm really intrigued by him. And I think like if you have to part with Stott in a deal like that, like I think Adames, you would hope that Stott can become that kind of player. And Adames does have 4 years of control. So I don't think that'd be a deal breaker or anything.
Yeah, I agree.
Any other thoughts? I like the idea of like stacking like a few solid bench guys that really cheap to bolster the bench and platoon with Kutch or however you look at it.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility, but I think focusing too much on the bench when it seems like there are holes in the lineup and, a little bit more important places like that. I think that's probably a secondary concern of mine, but
Sure, but I'm spending $6 million on those three guys, or $7 million on Brad Miller, Shin-Soo Choo, and Howie Kendrick.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, that's it for my ideal offseason. Um, so I guess Ty, what do you think? What do you think the Phillies offseason will look like?
What do I think it will look like? I don't exactly know. I think it'll be a little bit similar to both of ours in that I don't see JT Realmuto coming back because I think another team will outbid the Phillies. I think that is one thing that will overlap all three off seasons between the real one, yours and mine. I don't know what else they will do. It's tough to tell. They haven't really hinted at anything in their press conferences other than maybe don't expect a whole lot. That's kind of been the vibe they've been giving off in since the season ended. So I really don't know. I think they're going to get some kind of catcher in like whether it's Gary Sanchez, whether it's McCann, whether it's Realmuto. I think there's going to be some kind of catching acquisition at some point this offseason and a starter.
Yeah. Do you think what's the percent chance Andrew Knapp is a starting catcher on opening day, which has happened before? People forget that Andrew Knapp has started on opening day.
2018, right? Wow. I think it's like, I guess it's like a 20% chance.
Yeah, I mean, so even if let's say they sign Mike Zunino, which really, if they don't sign, re-sign Real Muto, sign McCann, or sign Yadier Molina, which it's not like the Phillies are the only team looking for a catcher. The Mets are looking for a catcher. The Yankees are probably looking for a catcher. The Cardinals, there are a bunch of teams who need a catcher. The Nats would love to upgrade that catcher. There aren't that many just pure starters, It's McCann, maybe Molina. I mean, who even knows at this point, and Real Muto. So then, even if he signs Zunino, it might be more of a platoon with him and Knapp. That, there's a very, very good chance that Knapp starts 70 games next year.
Yeah, not ideal if you're the Phillies, I would say.
Yeah, probably not. What do you think? What do you think shortstop looks like?
If I had to guess right now, I would say some kind of 1-year deal for a veteran or Gene Segura. One of those.
Gene Segura. That'd be kind of brutal. After they made a point to move Gene Segura off of shortstop. I mean, I think if Gene Segura is playing shortstop, then unless they signed Colton Wong or Hernandez, which I think is a possibility. I think there's a possibility they sign a second baseman. Then maybe they would keep Gene Segura at second and put Kingery at short. But I think there's a potential offseason where they sign a second baseman, and then in center field have a platoon between Kingery and Hazley, and then Segura back at short. That's not really ideal. Segura's solid. He was really good at second base, but having him and he's not great at shortstop anymore. Having him and Bohm on the left side of the infield is not ideal.
Yeah. Another question for you: Who do you think starts the most games at center field for the Phillies next season?
I would say Hazley. That feels like the most obvious choice. There isn't really anyone out there to sign to start other than obviously George Springer. But if they don't, it's not like they're gonna not sign JT Realmuto and then go sign George Springer. I don't think so. I think it's gonna be someone on the team unless they trade. Maybe the Angels trade Brandon Marsh.
Maybe they trade Mike Trout.
Maybe Mike Trout's not that good in the field anymore. Some say he's on the decline.
I've heard it.
All right. I think that'll wrap things up for today's episode. Thanks to everyone for listening. I was masked up for anyone watching. I in a public setting, so fortunately, you can't see my whole face if you're watching, or maybe fortunately. But we'll talk to you next week with hopefully some more off-season rumors will be flying by the next time we talk to you.